Welcome to my coverage of Namco Museum Volume 4. This set was released in Japan on November 8th, 1996, and in North America around June 30th, 1997. As mentioned previously, most of the games in this volume were unknown to mass audiences, with some still shrouded in obscurity to this day. This is the first volume in this series where most of the games were not released in arcades outside of Japan. Included in Volume 4 is Pac-Land, Ordyne, Assault, The Return of Ishtar, and the Genji and Heike clans. These games were released between 1984 to 1988. With the change in period these games covered compared to the previous volumes, we would see graphical features that wouldn't become available on home consoles until the 16-bit era. I will talk about this in further detail during the coverage of these games. The museum design for this set is like Volume 3, where there are themed exhibit halls for each game, though one room is nearly empty for some reason. I wonder why. The most interesting item I came across was the Pac-Land board game. This followed the Tower of Drag as part of Namco's fantasy board game series, and later succeeded by Dragon Buster. The game rooms have cool themes. My favorites are the beach for Pac-Land, where Pac-Man and the Misses are relaxing with Sue watching them from afar, and Ordyne, which is set in the Sky-In, where the number 7650 rings up when you speak to Miyuki-chan. The library and theater are now accessed via elevator. The theater, where you view and listen to each game's sprites and audio, now features a pick-pack robot band that plays music to the delight of the crowd. The library has an upscale design with an art gallery where you view illustrations and sketches from each game, except for the Return of Ishtar. The game option windows carry over from Volume 3. When you exit a game, you now have the option to jump to a different game or go back to the museum. The load screens now feature an assortment of artwork based on the museum and each game. Let's begin with my favorite and most popular game in this volume, and that is Pac-Land. Released in 1984, this series transitions from navigating through mazes to a side-scrolling adventure game. Pac-Land is based on the 1982 Hanna-Barbera animated series Pac-Man, which I enjoyed watching as a kid. I will reference more cartoon tie-ins during this coverage. The track that plays throughout most levels is based on the cartoon's opening theme. The objective is for Pac-Man to safely guide the fairies, which he hides in his hat, through Pac-Land while avoiding the ghost monsters to reach Fairyland and then make the return trip back home where his family awaits. Pac-Land employs an unusual control scheme. Instead of a joystick to move Pac-Man, two buttons are used to move him left and right with another button to jump. Tapping then holding the directional buttons makes Pac-Man run. This is helpful for jumping across gaps and over or onto high obstacles and platforms. This scheme is used by default for this version, but there is an option to use a directional pad to move Pac-Man, making him easier to control. Pac-Man's movement can be slippery. Even with the slightest tap of the button, Pac-Man will take a few steps, which could send him falling down a hole. In areas such as bridges and mountains where precise jumping is required, avoid unnecessary movement after landing, that way he remains still, unless you plan on jumping again after landing. Pac-Land's landscape is diverse with areas such as towns, forests, lakes, deserts, mountains, bridges, and ghost mansions. While passing through Pac-Land, you're treated to background parallax scrolling with foreground scrolling in the forests. Levels take place during different times of the day to provide variety in the color display. There are obstacles Pac-Man must overcome. In towns and bridges, fire hydrants shoot water. It carries Pac-Man along in whichever direction it moves if he's caught by it. Along bridges, geysers rise from the water, sucking in Pac-Man if he gets caught. Grabbing ship icons lengthens bridge platforms, making it easier to get across gaps. If you see a skull in the desert, that means quicksand is surrounding it. A running jump or hopping on a ghost can get you over that hazard. To get across gaps in the mountains, you'll need to jump on rolling, falling, and floating logs, along with rising and falling clouds. You will bounce off springboards to get across lakes. Inside the ghost mansions, you grab keys to open locked doors. These locations become tougher to navigate with some levels shrouded in darkness, providing a limited line of sight. Levels are arranged in trips consisting of 4 rounds. You move from left to right for the first 3 rounds. For the 4th round, which is the return trip home, you move from right to left. There's an option to select which trip up to the 5th or individual round you want to start at. While wandering through Pac-Land, you will encounter our old friends, the ghost monsters. Their sprites are based on their animated counterparts. This also applies to Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, and Pac-Baby in the US arcade release. This version is based on the Japanese release, which gives Pac-Man different eyes, a long nose, and a feathered hat, though Pac-Man here has a short nose. The sprites for Ms. Pac-Man and Pac-Baby differ as well. The ghosts come after Pac-Man in creative ways. In town, they drive cars and double-decker buses. They appear from windows dropping mini-ghosts on Pac-Man. Ghosts use pogo sticks to bounce on Pac-Man. They float around in UFOs or fly propeller planes where they may drop mini-ghosts on the Paxter or change altitude. Sue is the only ghost that does not use any of these tactics. She always shadows Pac-Man as a means for him to get moving, except in the ghost mansions. As you progress, the frequency and speed of the ghosts intensifies. There's a timer at the bottom of the screen representing Pac-Man that disappears as time elapses. When this expires, Sue's speed picks up to include the mansions. While running into a ghost costs Pac-Man a life, you can safely jump on top of them, which is useful for getting across tough areas such as quicksand, forests, or lakes. Pac-Man can protect himself from the ghosts. Fire hydrants, cacti, and tree stumps can be pushed back to reveal surprises. One of them is a helmet that protects Pac-Man from dropped mini-ghosts while giving him 300 points for any that land on him. Pac-Man becomes invisible, making him invulnerable to the ghosts, but he could still fall down holes, water, or into quicksand. Jumping at the right spot makes a lucky pack appear, giving you points for your remaining time and replenishing the timer, and a special pack awards an extra life. After the 3rd round in each trip, you reach Fairyland where the Fairy Queen gives you special boosts to fly back home. Ms. Pac-Man and Pac-Baby greet you when you make it back. In the US arcade version, their dog and cat, Chomp Chomp and Sourpuss, appear as well. Now let's talk scoring. Your score increases in 10-point increments when moving forward. Fruits appear as you move along or when you jump at certain points. Their point values increase as you eat more of them, but reset after every 4 you eat. Power pellets appear and you know the drill. Because there are more ghosts to eat to include the mini-ghosts, you can receive up to 7,650 points per ghost. Airplane ghosts may drop a flagship Galaxian for, you guessed it, 7,650 points. Going back to pushing objects, 6 balloons may appear. 5 of them are worth 100 points and 1 gives you, that's right. When you reach the end of each round, make sure to jump. Landing on the right spot awards you get the idea. You also earn points for any remaining time. Pac-Land was ported to consoles such as the Famicom, Atari Lynx, and the TurboGrafx and PC Engine. The latter version featured intermission scenes after every 2 trips and an ending after completing 32 rounds. According to a 2015 interview, a link is in the description, Pac-Man creator Toru Iwatani mentioned that Shigeru Miyamoto told him that Super Mario Bros. Drew influence from Pac-Land. Here's a comparison of the 2 games. What do you think? Next up is Ordyne. This comical-themed side-scrolling shooter was released in 1988. Yuichiro Tomari has developed Ordyne, an atomic conversion device, but the evil Kubota stole it and kidnapped Yuichiro's bride-to-be, Miss Kana. Dr. Tomari enlists his assistant Felix to rescue Miss Kana and retrieve Ordyne. Ordyne features co-op gameplay. Your plane has 2 weapons. Your main weapon fires horizontal shots and your secondary weapon drops bombs, which is useful for destroying ground targets or aerial enemies below you. While the action scrolls horizontally, the screen moves vertically when going up or down. Take precaution when moving vertically as you may unexpectedly run into an enemy, its bullets, or an obstacle. If you lose a life, your plane regenerates where you were defeated without interruption to the action. For the first 5 rounds, when you use a continue, play resumes at a checkpoint not far from where you lost your last life. For rounds 6 and 7, you restart the stage. Most enemy ships have a cartoon-like appearance reminiscent of Fantasy Zone. Enemies also include animals such as dolphins, clams, turtles, and alligators. Ground enemies consist of mounted guns that aim and fire bullets in different directions, and generators that release clusters of enemies at once. Enemies appear individually or in group formations just like in Gradius. Ordyne consists of 7 stages taking place in environments such as the sky, a volcano, underwater, crystal caverns, and more. These locations are presented in a vivid color scheme with parallax scrolling. Some sections feature cool rotation effects. You weave through plenty of tight spots in some areas, especially late in the game. Beware that crashing to a ceiling, floor, or other obstacle costs a life. There are shootable walls which hide crystals. Like many shooters, memorizing the stage layouts and enemy placement makes the journey less frustrating. At times, the screen overflows with bullets, but the amount of available space to maneuver around makes dodging manageable. It's helpful to use both weapons at once to clear out more and potentially unseen enemies. Destroyed enemies may leave crystals. Grab them quickly as they will float away. You can also find crystals in fixed spots in some rounds. Crystals are used to purchase items at the Sky Inn, which you encounter a couple of times in each round. Miyuki-chan presents you with a choice of 3 items, which include special weapons, extra speed, stronger bombs, or an extra life. Special weapons include a rapid-fire Vulcan shot, 3-way blasts, homing missiles, a stock bomber which absorbs enemy bullets to release powerful shots in return, a front and rear burner, the last of which can quickly wipe out bosses, and more. Special weapons have limited use as indicated by the spectral display at the bottom of the screen, which depletes over time. Special bomb shots are limited to 5 uses. Shop items increase in price as you advance in the game. Bonus points and crystals are awarded at the completion of each round. You receive an additional 5,000 crystals on top of the ones you retain when you use a continue. Running into the robot flying the Dream Company Limited banner takes you to a mini game where you spend crystals to launch a ball onto a spinning wheel like in roulette. You win prizes based on the number the ball lands on when the wheel stops. Prizes include extra crystals up to 100,000 and power-ups which can be equipped now or after losing a life. You may also end up with nothing. Try not to miss out on this opportunity. While Ordyne was not released in North American arcades, it was released for the TurboGrafx 16. The gameplay is consistent with the arcade version with quality music and sound effects. The graphics feature a decent amount of color, though not at the arcade level, and it lacks the parallax scrolling and scaling and rotation effects. Nonetheless, it's a well done port. Next is another Japanese exclusive arcade title, and that is the Genji and the Heike clans. The original name of this 1986 game is Genpei ToumaDen. The story is about a warrior named Kagekyo, a member of the Heike clan, who was tasked with killing Yoritomo of the Genji clan. Kagekyo was captured in battle and perished soon after. The Genji clan, with the aid of demons, has conquered the world and wiped out the Heike clan. The Lord of Heaven asks an old lady to resurrect a member of the Heike clan to stop Yoritomo, and Kagekyo rises from the depths of hell to stop him. This hack and slash game presents the action in 3 different modes. The bulk of the action takes place in side mode where Kagekyo battles hordes of dragons, animals, insects, archers, and the undead. Some enemies emerge from generators that can be destroyed. Watch out for boulder shards that drop when you get near them. You can jump on them to get across pits. You can jump on enemies to reach higher platforms. When you're idle, it'll take a second to build up enough speed to successfully jump across pits or platforms. Try to get through these levels quickly to avoid being overwhelmed by enemies and their projectiles. In big mode, your character, enemies, and stage details are enlarged. The pace of action in this mode is slower than side mode. You will fight beasts such as tigers and monkeys along with demons. Arrows are fired at you from different heights, though they can be destroyed with your sword. Boss fights take place here. In this mode, you can swing your sword in different ways. Overhead swings are effective against regular enemies and projectiles. Kneeling thrusts work well against bosses. Both side and big mode feature detailed terrain with many layers of parallax scrolling in both the foreground and background. Impressive for its time, yet it can be distracting, causing you to lose track of the enemies and hazards surrounding you. Plane mode is played from an overhead view. These areas have destroyable enemy generators along with treasure chests containing jewels. Like in side mode, enemies can quickly become a chore to dispatch of, so try to rush through these levels. At the end of these stages, there are a choice of several torii arches to enter, with each one taking you to a different part of the map. You also play from this perspective if you fall into a pit in side mode. When you reach the end of the area in this situation, you must choose a casket which can take you back to the stage you were previously in with your health restored, or your game ends. Your health is represented by candles and you have 1 life. With the number of enemies and projectiles you encounter, you'll take lots of hits. Most attacks slowly chip away your health. A portion of it is recovered after completing a section. Candle icons restore and increase your maximum health. If you run out of health, you continue at the start of the last area you were in, except for when you get past Kyoto, as you will continue from that point even if you have completed several sections after that. The number next to the sword icon at the bottom left corner represents your weapon's strength. It depletes when striking hard objects or surfaces. You'll know this when you hear those clangs. Grabbing a scroll temporarily gives you altered attacks. As mentioned earlier, you collect jewels from chests and also from enemies and their generators. These different colored jewels restore some health, power up your sword, or serve as currency to purchase the 2 previously mentioned items, which are represented as icons such as a large sword and a rice bag, which reduces your gem count when you grab them. Genpei ToumaDen was ported to the PC Engine, and it retains much of the graphical details, audio, and the multi-layered parallax scrolling. A console-exclusive sequel was released for the system and made its way to North America under the name Samurai Ghost. Next is the oddest game in this set, and that is the Return of Ishtar. This 1986 action RPG is the sequel to the Tower of Jiraga. In the prior game, Gilgamesh defeated the demon Jiraga to rescue the maiden Ki. This time your goal is to guide Gil and Ki down the tower. This game requires 2 players, with player 1 controlling Ki and player 2 controlling Gil. The control setup for this compilation allows you to utilize both characters with 1 controller by controlling Ki with the directional pad and Gil with the face buttons, though I strongly recommend playing this with 2 actual players. Ki is the main character to use as she casts an assortment of spells to vanquish enemies and to perform other functions, while Gil's sole purpose is to attack enemies with his sword, which automatically draws when he's near an enemy. Before playing this game, read the manual, otherwise you'll be clueless as to what to do. 1 hit from any enemy ends the game, but you can continue from the start of the last floor you were in. You also receive a password allowing you to resume your adventure later. The stages are not arranged in mazes like its predecessor, but they have multiple doors from which you can exit. The levels wrap around in each direction. Each floor has a name which you need to pay close attention to, as it's possible for you to go back up floors. The enemies you encounter carry over from the Tower of Jiraga, such as knights, slime, and wizards. It takes trial and error to figure out which spells are effective against them. Whenever Gil defeats an enemy, a portion of his strength depletes as indicated at the bottom right corner of the screen. The amount that depletes varies with each foe, so take notes on this. It's best to let Ki do most of the work when it comes to defeating enemies. Gil's maximum strength increases throughout the game, allowing him to slay more adversaries. Key spells are grouped in several categories: attack, medical, assist, special, and light. These spells have limited use, though there is no on-screen indicator as to how many uses each spell has. The manual mentions magic point usage for some spells. The fireball is one spell that has infinite use. Attack spells have varying strength and effectiveness against enemies. As with other aspects of this game, take notes on which attack spells works the best on certain enemies. Light spells allow you to identify the name of the enemies and determine if the doors take you down a floor. Medical spells restore a portion of Gil's strength. If you take too long to exit the floor, will-o-wisps take over and escaping becomes a challenge. There's a spell that displays the amount of time remaining. It's easy to get in each other's way, so whoever controls Ki should be the one to call all the shots. It takes time to know when you should fight, to include which character should take out the enemies, and when to run and grab the keys to find the exit. It helps to split up to divert the enemy's attention since the action focuses on Ki. When she reaches the exit, you can use the spell to summon Gil to her. We move on to Assault. This is an overhead tank shooter that was released in 1988. You control a tank that must save your planet, which is located light years away from Earth, from a military force that arrived from Earth and has occupied and wiped out the inhabitants of your home world. In the arcades, your fighter was controlled using twin tank sticks. The left stick controls the tank's left tread, while the right stick controls the right tread. Moving both sticks up moves your tank forward, while moving both sticks down moves your tank backwards. Moving the left stick down and the right stick up makes the tank turn left. With the left stick up and the right stick down, the tank turns right. There are other movements, but I'll get to that later. Using the PlayStation controller, the directional pad controls the left tank tread and the face buttons controls the right tread. There's an option to simplify the controls by having the directional pad perform all movements while the face buttons are used to fire. Of course, I use this option to get the best performance. Your tank can roll to the left and right to dodge bullets. You can switch directions mid-roll. Make sure there's ample space in these directions to avoid being cornered. Your tank fires 2 weapons. The main gun shoots 3 rounds at a time, which diffuses small enemy rounds. Your tank performs a wheelie where you launch grenade rounds, damaging everything in its blast radius. While grenades are powerful, it's risky as you are left defenseless in this state. Wheelies cannot be done over water. The action pauses when you lose a life and resumes when you regenerate, which is at the spot of your defeat. You continue at the beginning of the round when all lives are lost. Assault has 11 stages where the objective is to reach the target point where you must destroy all armored fortresses. There's a time limit to complete each round. Bonus points are awarded based on your remaining time once the last fortress is destroyed. Some rounds take place in new maps, while others continue from the previous one. For the rounds that transition to a different map, you're treated to scaling and zoom effects. The level maps provide plenty of space for movement and paths to take. As you turn, the map rotates. You receive a directional prompt if you move away from the target area. The terrain consists of forests, lakes, rivers, swamps, and cities. There's plenty of destructible objects. Beware that tanks are hidden in some objects. Destroyed enemies or objects leaves debris which slows you down when you move over it. This also applies when moving over terrain such as forests, water, and rocks. Given the number of enemies in each stage, along with the wide open terrain, it's easy to get hit by surprise. Check all corners and dead ends to clear any foes, as it only takes one to tail you and gun you down. Enemies mostly consist of tanks and mounted guns. Tanks come in different sizes and colors, denoting the type of firepower, speed, and the amount of armor they have. The dark tanks can blend in with the forests, which can catch you off guard. There are amphibious vehicles that launch missiles from underwater. These vehicles cannot be destroyed if they're fully submerged. Missiles are launched from silos, which are indestructible. There are enemies that bounce around, often in groups, launching missiles. They can only be defeated when they are on the ground. There's a large floating ship reminiscent of the one from Xevious that fires an assortment of projectiles. You'll need grenades to destroy them. Lift pads, which are pentagon shaped, launch your tank high above the ground. The map scales out when this happens, giving you a view of the area around you. You can rotate the map and drop multiple grenades to clear out clusters of enemies. Lift pads have a limited number of uses. In some stages, using the lift pads can be a death trap as enemies will surround the pad if you use it. Now, you didn't think I would go through this video without revisiting that empty room, huh? There's a hidden surprise. Simultaneously pressing all the L and R buttons, up and triangle makes a woman appear. Talk to her and she points you to the stand where a monitor appears displaying Assault Plus. Activate it and a cocktail cabinet pops up, taking you to an arena where you can play that game. Assault Plus was released only in Japan in late 1988. Gameplay is identical to Assault. The stages are recolored and the enemy placement is different. There's a choice between Easy Assault and Super Assault. Easy Assault has 5 stages and is less difficult than the original Assault. Super Assault has 10 stages with increased difficulty. Here is side-by-side footage of Assault and Assault Plus so you can see the differences. That completes my coverage of Volume 4. Overall, I have a favorable view of the games in this set. I enjoy Pac-Land for its cartoon design along with the diversity in levels, obstacles, and the ways the ghosts come after you. Games like Pac-Land would become the norm on 8-bit home consoles. If you're into shooters like Fantasy Zone and Parodius, then you will enjoy Ordyne. It's not difficult early on, but the challenge ramps up late in the game. The simplified controls for Assault make it accessible for players to have a blast blasting away tanks and dodging bullets. While ninja games were the craze during the 80s, the Genji and the Heike clans went with an eerie take on the samurai theme, and it provides lots of action and platforming. The Return of Ishtar is the one game that is a blemish on this set. While I got into the game a bit after taking a while to understand what we needed to do, I don't think this title would appeal to most players because of the complexity of managing the spells and the one-hit deaths. As mentioned throughout the video, several of these games were ported to the PC Engine and TurboGrafx. Those consoles would become the home to numerous Namco arcade ports, many of which were ported faithfully. In hindsight, Ordyne and Assault would have made nice additions to the Super Famicom library, as the system would have taken advantage of the graphical capabilities of those games. Is Namco Museum Volume 4 worth getting for your collection? My answer is, it depends. If price is not an issue, then my answer would be yes. Given that this set has sold for close to $100 for the North American version, I would recommend obtaining a Japanese copy, which can go for less than half the price of a North American copy. Of course, the trade-off is that you won't be able to read the information from each exhibit unless you know Japanese. Next will be Volume 5, which features some of Namco's finest work from the late 1980s. See you next time.